Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Age Group Triathlon podcast. In this week's episode, I'm going to be looking at some tips to help talk you through your first open water swim. Now, if you're an experienced triathlete, there might not be much that's new in here for you. There might be a few bits, there might not. But if you are an experienced triathlete, before just skipping this episode, please share it with a novice triathlete, somebody who you know who's starting out in the sport, who's maybe considering the sport. Send it on to them because they'll probably find a lot of value in it. Now, before we get stuck right in, a little reminder about the pre-sale of my strength and conditioning course. This is the last week it's going to be available. I know I put an episode out last week, so I wasn't sure there were going to be any copies left. That's not going to be a concern. I actually made a mistake when I started advertising it. The link to the checkout didn't actually work, so there are plenty of copies left. That's a bit embarrassing for me. But have a look down in the show notes, follow that link. You have a fully comprehensive guide with everything you need to start doing strength and conditioning and to integrate it within your triathlon training for 50% off. That's only £25 for all of this information. It includes 9 12-week training programs, information on anatomy, demonstration videos. There's a lot of value in there. So go down, grab your copy while you can. So moving on to the main subject at hand. Your first open water swim is, in a word, terrifying. Now, before we get stuck right in, I want to share with you my story of my first ever open water swim. So, I went down to Sigma Sports in Kingston, near where I lived at the time. A chap called Ian, who some of you may well know, helped me pick out a wetsuit. And so I then, I think it was even later that week, because I had a race coming up. The first ever try I did was in a pool. My second ever triathlon was the Cotswold Super Sprint Triathlon. Again, some of you may have raced that. And it was a 300 metre swim, not even worth getting wet for, some people would say. 300 metres, the water was about 12 degrees, it was early May. And so I went down to Heron Lake, which is sort of outside London. It was the only lake that was open at the time. And there with my brand new Zone 3 Advanced wetsuit. I sort of went in, sort of signed up, filled out the questionnaire, all the forms, all of that. And went in sort of the clubhouse bit and sort of climbed into my wetsuit. Now, I've been shown how to put it on, but, it was a bit of an art. And by this point, I think I had been training for about 6 or 7 months. I think I started training for triathlon around September of 2012. August, September time, which was too late to be able to get ready for a race that year. So I had a really long run up to my first race. So, I knew a lot about triathlon. I'd read so much about open water. I'd done all of my homework. Sort of pulled on my wetsuit and walked barefooted out. And it hit me as soon as I stepped out the door. I'm really going to do this. There's sort of such a build up to it. I'd probably become my own worst enemy with it, sort of, because there's so much expectation around this moment. And I wasn't an especially confident swimmer. I could swim, obviously, the super sprint that I'd done, that the pool-based one, that was a 400-metre swim. So I knew I could swim the distance quite handily, but open water, that's a different kettle of fish, especially when I'm now in this giant rubber suit. So here I am, at the tender age of 23, maybe 24, I can't remember. And I'm stood at the edge of this lake, and I remember looking out, and there is a little 400-metre loop, as most places have. And I looked out to that first buoy, and it suddenly hit me. I thought, I've got to get in there, and I've got to swim out to that. The water was cold, and suddenly I just kind of got hit with this fear. I'm going to call it what it is. It was fear that I had to get in and I had to swim. Now, in my mind, this wasn't a problem. I would, in sort of the build up to my first sort of year of triathlon, I would look out over lakes and I'd think, yeah, I could swim across that lake. There's only a couple hundred meters. In principle, I imagine myself facing the water, beautiful front crawl, cutting across this lake. When you're actually there, stood on a chilly morning in spring, that first buoy, it looks like an awfully long way away. And it really took a long time to pluck up the courage. I'm pretty sure that everybody walking past me, getting into the water, could see me and go, yeah, that guy's absolutely bricking it. And I then eventually sort of got myself walked into the water, cold water on my feet. Obviously I've been in the sea, been in sort of lakes before, but 12 degrees, I think it was. That's pretty nippy. In fact, 12 degrees is actually my cut-off for open water swimming. If it is 12 degrees, I will get in to get a little bit of time in the water, even if I'm going to be a bit shivery. But anything below 12, no, that's it. That's my cut-off. I'm not getting in. Back to the story. I notice about kind of 50 meters out, maybe not even that, because this was dual use lake. It was for swimming as well as for water sports. And there was a ramp that was there for ski jumps, not water ski jumps, whatever. And I thought, right, I need to head out to that. So I got in and I did heads up breaststroke for 50 meters out to this this ramp, and I got there and I clung onto this slimy ramp for dear life. And honestly, I think I'm one of many hundreds of people who over the years has swum out to that ramp and clung onto it for dear life when they realised what they're actually doing. But I wasn't going to turn around. I'd already done a triathlon, albeit not an open water triathlon at some point. I'd already done a triathlon. I was feeling more confident in myself. And I was thinking, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And I slowly plucked up the courage because I noticed how different it felt in that wetsuit. Slowly plucked up the courage to head out and to swim this 400 meter loop. And I think it was one of the slowest 400 meters that has ever been recorded. I haven't checked the Guinness Book of Records, but I'm pretty confident. And I remember I got back to the land, as it were, back to the start, and sort of sat there on the edge of the water going, wow, I just did that. And it filled me with a sense of real accomplishment. This, it was this very intimidating prospect. I actually gone out there and I'd managed to achieve something which very few people would even ever dare to try. Now, I then did get I did then pluck up the courage to get in and do another 400 meter loop. If memory serves, I think I tried at a couple of points to put my face in the water and swim freestyle, but I don't think it lasted for more than about sort of 3 or 4 meters at any given time. What really kind of got me was the fact that I was looking down and I couldn't see the bottom of the lake. Now, let's be honest, a lot of the times you don't really want to see what's at the bottom of a lake or any open water, any body of open water you're swimming in. However, it just freaked me out, kind of looking down into this abyss, and that was the thing that really sort of tested me for the first 2 years of my triathlon sort of career, as it were. So, yeah, it did take a lot of time for me to acclimatise to open water, but I made a lot of mistakes in this first open water swim of mine, and I want to set you up for success so you have a slightly more positive experience than I did. Now, before we even get to the lake, okay, I want to make sure that you're going to turn up with the right equipment. Now, if you are getting ready for a triathlon in, say, the spring, early season, where the water is going to be relatively cold, then you're going to want to have a wetsuit. Now, you may say, oh, I don't have a wetsuit yet, and look, I get it, they're expensive. But if you're planning to do a wetsuit race, and the water is going to be cold, by you turning up and trying to get in your swimming trunks, it's going to be a really negative experience because you're going to be really cold. You're not going to have the additional buoyancy provided by the wetsuit, and there's a good chance that swim will actually do more harm than good, in that it will just leave you feeling sort of more scared, more anxious than you need to be about the race that's coming up. If you wait until you get your wetsuit, again, this is one of the few times where I tell somebody, look, just put it on the credit card, because the clock is ticking to the event and you need to make sure that you are ready. Now, if it is really early season and the temperature is going to be below kind of, I'd say, 15, 16 degrees, you may want to consider some cold water swimming gear. Now, this is only if you are completely infatuated with triathlon and you know this is the sport for me. I'm so madly in love with triathlon and the process, and I can't get enough of the sport. I'm obsessed, and you know that you're going to be in this sport for years to come. Then that's when you need to invest in this cold water gear. If you are a little bit unsure, if you're just going to do 1 or 2 years of triathlon, then maybe hold fire on this, because you may not actually get an enormous amount of use out of it. I have all the cold water gear, all the cold water gear listed, but realistically only use them 2 or 3 times a year. Now, the most important thing you want to consider is a neoprene swim hat. So this is a hat that sits under your regular swim hat. Now, you will need a regular swim hat regardless of the temperature. It should be brightly coloured. It should not be black, essentially, or it should have a very, very, very clear, visible colour to it, not just a coloured stripe. The reason for this is so that lifesavers can spot you. If you get yourself into trouble and you're an athlete in a black wetsuit with a black hat, it can be hard for them to spot a swimmer in distress. Chances are they won't let you in the water. So, you need to make sure that you've got a swimming hat that is a nice bright colour if you want to be swimming in the open water. Now, the neoprene swim hat sits under your normal swimming hat because it's black, and it provides an added layer of insulation. Now, if you are swimming in cold water, there is a phenomenon which I am very familiar with called ice cream head. Now, ice cream head is what happens when you get cold water on your head and it feels like you've just taken a really big bite of really cold ice cream, and you get this headache that comes with it. Now, in the early season, this is sort of inevitable. I think I get it in the first open water swim that I do every single year. And you know what? That's alright. It just I know it's going to happen and I'm prepared for it. So I take the neoprene skull cap, and that does go a long way to reducing it. But I know that definitely for the first swim, I'm going to be alternating between front crawl and heads up breaststroke while I allow my head to recover. That's just me. That's how my body works. And because it's only ever a problem for the first 1 or 2 swims of the year, it is what it is. But I will wear that neoprene skull cap until the water gets up to about 14 or 15 to help reduce the severity or the chances of me getting this ice cream headache. Now, if you do decide to get yourself a nice neoprene skull cap, go for one with a chin strap, okay, that will keep it in place. If you have the ones that are literally just a little cap that sit on your head that just stay on via tension, chances are that is going to work its way off during the swim and you're going to have to keep readjusting it. So definitely go for a chin strap one. The next accessory you might want is a pair of gloves, neoprene gloves. Now, these, as are all of the other accessories that I'm going to list, they are banned in events. Now, you can wear a neoprene skull cap in a triathlon because you gain no advantage from that. However, you will not be able to use gloves or booties or a rash vest in a triathlon because they provide you additional surface area in the case of the gloves and the booties. So they will allow you to move more water with each kick or each stroke. And the rash vest will offer you additional buoyancy. So all of these next ones are banned in events. However, they can be useful for early or late season training. Now, moving on to the gloves themselves. The reason that we tend to go for gloves is that our extremities are the furthest from the heart and they are the most likely to get cold. And when you nearly all of your body is covered by a wetsuit except your hands, your feet and your head, and that just accentuates this. And it is really very common for triathletes to end up with numb cold hands when they're swimming open water in cold temperatures. So to get around this, we'll often wear gloves in the very early season to help us protect us against this. However, if your race is coming up in only a couple of weeks and the water temperature isn't going to be much different, you might want to consider whether it's really a good idea using the gloves, because your body might just acclimatise to using the gloves, and then when you take them off on race day, you might find yourself with problems. So it might be a better idea, all being said, to not use gloves if your race is very soon. But if you haven't got a race for, at least a few weeks, you've got plenty of time to acclimatise. When buying gloves or any neoprene item, you want the fit to be really quite snug. Because the way that wetsuits and these neoprene accessories work is that they trap a layer of water against your skin, and that water in turn will heat up using your skin, and you'll have this layer of warm water in your wetsuit and your neoprene accessories, which is going to keep you warm. Now, if you have a wetsuit or gloves or booties which are very sort of generous fitting, where there is going to be a lot more water in there, the water isn't going to get trapped in the same way, and it's going to take much longer for any trapped water to heat up, and you really won't get much of the benefit. So you really do want to go for probably the smallest size that you can get away with. Bear in mind that most of these items are unisex, so gents would probably be looking at sort of medium at the minimum in most cases. And and ladies, you might want to consider that a large pair of booties, large pair of gloves are designed for the largest of men out there. So do take this into consideration if you're ordering online. You also get different levels of cold water gear. You get some which is just your basic standard neoprene, which is what most people will be using. You also get some like cold water versions, which include within them sort of a reflective layer. Inside the glove, there's often actually some silvery surface. The idea being it reflects the heat back onto you. These are definitely a step up in price, and for most triathletes, you probably don't need that real cold water version. The exception being is if you're going to be taking on sort of say one of the extreme triathlons, where they tend to be sort of a Ironman distance swim, 3.8 kilometers in ice cold water that's going to be sort of 12 degrees, maybe under 12 degrees. You really do need all the help you can get in that situation. But for most of us, you can probably save you money and just go for the standard neoprene accessories. Next up, we have the booties, and the same principles really apply here as for the gloves. Now, it may be that you know from experience that your feet always get really cold, but your hands are fine, or vice versa. You may have got an idea of this even from pool swimming. So don't feel that you always need to go for both. If you just need one and not the other, that's absolutely fine. One of the benefits of the booties is that it does make it easy on your feet when you're walking around as well. And of course, it helps keep you nice and insulated. It doesn't give you as much as a benefit. It doesn't change your stroke quite as much as the gloves do. Sorry, having the booties on my feet, I don't really notice it a huge amount. But when I'm wearing neoprene gloves, that it really does interfere with my feel for the water and the catch. And I definitely notice that I'm wearing them. The booties, not quite so much. So, if you are thinking I'm only going to get one and not the other, just give some thought to the above points and see which one will be the best bet for you. The final open water accessory is sort of a rash vest, a neoprene undervest. And this gives you simply another layer of insulation, just like layering up if you're going out for a walk. And this is something that I will use sort of for the first swim of the season, just to help really make it as comfortable as possible. I know that I'm probably not going to be racing for a few weeks yet. So I want to make sure that as I'm going into this, that I'm going to be as comfortable as possible, really. Again, if your race is coming up soon, you might not want to get used to this. But the neoprene vests, they're relatively affordable. I know that lots of different wetsuit manufacturers make them. I would recommend going for the sleeveless version rather than a long sleeve version, if I'm honest. It's just an awful lot more comfortable, less chance of rubbing. And yeah, those are sort of your standard neoprene accessories that you might want to consider for a really early open water swim. Now, if you've got all of the kit that you need, remember, you need some goggles as well, and I recommend some nice sort of open water goggles that have got a wider view and that might be tinted or have polarized lenses to help with the sun. And you have filled out, go on the website and check they don't need you to fill out a form before you get there. And you paid any sort of membership requirements. It can be that you have to you have to pay a standard fee of about £20 for the year before you are able to book any swims, which can make things difficult if you are if you're traveling and you only have limited access to lakes, and you go, oh, I'll go for a swim at the local lake. Oh no, they want me to sign up to this whole membership thing. So just be cautious of that. But you want to make sure that you turn up having filled out any forms and with any information required. They may need ID, medical details of your doctor. They're just trying to protect themselves if you were to ever get yourself into trouble. And I think this is probably a good time to to remind you that I don't think I've ever heard of a triathlete drowning in a race or at a training venue that hasn't suffered some sort of associated issue. Now, very sadly, there are some people out there who every year there'll be a handful of athletes normally who don't make it out of the water at an event. And nearly all the time, if not every time, but I don't want to say every time, the vast majority of the time, what's happened is they have suffered an unrelated health incident in the water. So maybe they've had a cardiac arrest, I think is the most common one, where somebody is in this race situation, they're nervous, there's lots of people around them, they're anxious, and they may be swimming harder than they should be. And, a lot of the times people who have these issues, they have sort of undiagnosed heart concerns. And unfortunately, they suffer a cardiac arrest in the water. And yeah, it's very difficult to spot somebody in the water having a cardiac arrest in time, because they will just be face down in the water, which is why, unfortunately, a tiny percentage of triathletes every year don't make it out of the water. Now, I want to keep this in perspective a bit. If you look at sort of any major sort of mass participation sporting events, marathons, all of these, there's always going to be a low level of risk in anything you do. Certainly, anything that's going to be worthwhile. If you look at the casualty rates of how many people each year die from drink driving, distracted driving, all this on the roads, I'd say it is probably more dangerous to drive down a motorway or a freeway if you're in the States, highway, than it is to swim in open water. Now, it's completely understandable that somebody could feel nervous, could feel anxious in open water. Okay, it's not a natural environment. I just, like I told you at the start of the episode, how much I freaked out during my first swim. But I want you to remain assured that, that between the water safety crews and the wetsuit that you'll be swimming in, I imagine, chances of you actually getting into trouble are extremely slim. If you are feeling anxious, if you are feeling unsure, I'm going to go into this in a bit, you can roll over onto your back and float there until help arrives. Stick your hand in the air and the lifeguards will spot you and they'll come out to pick you up. So I do not want anyone to be sort of listening to this thinking, oh goodness, what if I drown? Because the chances of that happening are, again, I'm not going to say it's zero, but it's incredibly small. You would be the first one to do so, I believe. If you were just to get yourself into trouble, to run out of energy, you're not going to get yourself into any real trouble. When you get to the site, they may hopefully be changing areas, but if there aren't, really it's very accepted that people are going to be getting changed in their cars, open water swimming venues, so maybe don't look through the windows of other people's cars. But it really shouldn't be a huge issue, but you might want to wear something that will be easy, wear something to the venue that's going to be easy to slip out of, to get yourself ready for that swim, to get yourself changed. Nothing that's going to be too awkward or fiddly. And then you want to get yourself into your wetsuit. I mean, I would recommend, certainly you don't want to put your wetsuit on in your car, take your swimming costume with you, put your swimming costume on, then step outside the car, and that's when you put your wetsuit on. Now, I'm not going to cover putting the wetsuit on here. It's too much of a big topic. I'm going to release a course, hopefully, soon on choosing a wetsuit and how to put it on properly. We'll cover all of that, which will be a free course. And we can cover it there, but I don't really have the time to go into it here. All I'm going to say is just make sure you pull all the fabric up towards your shoulders about as high as it can be. That's going to give you more flexibility in your shoulders in the water. It's going to make you feel less restricted and less panicked. You will likely need some form of sort of wristband or something system so that they can keep track with who's in the water and who's come out, so that if somebody sort of taps in and doesn't tap out, they know that there's an issue. There may also be a similar one where you can leave your keys on a board and take a numbered wristband with you in the water and then exchange that for your keys. So just be aware that there's probably going to be a system like this. I recommend if you do take a wristband, stick it around your ankle rather than around your wrist, just because it's not going to get in the way so much there. So at this point, you're ready to have the same moment that I did. You're going to stand at the shoreline, and you look out over the water, and you're going to go, oh dear, this is actually happening. Now, feel free to take a bit of time here, and I'm going to talk you through my recommendations of what to do if you are a nervous, anxious swimmer. First thing I recommend you do is you wade into the water up to your shins, okay? I'll let the water fill up the bottom of your wetsuit a little bit, and then wade in a little bit further. Now, we all know that once the cold water gets to a certain point on our body, we're going to have a real ooh moment. And honestly, it's probably better to get this over with sooner rather than later, rather than leave it too long and overthink it. So maybe take a minute and then walk in up to your waist and just sort of take a moment to acclimatise, and then when you feel okay, drop down up to your shoulders in the water. And this may involve squatting down in the water, or may even involve lying down in the water. A lot of open water venues have sort of a sandy beach bit at the entry and exit. I highly recommend that you stay within this and just let your wetsuit fill up, and just get used to the idea of being in the water. Next thing you want to do is, once you feel confident again, when you're very much in your depth, is to lie back and just float. Now, you may not be very floaty in the water. I know I'm not floaty in the water. Lay back, look up at the sky, and breathe. Okay? Float there, you're safe. You're close to the shore, and you're just getting used to the idea of being in the water. Now, even if you're not in the sea, the chances are you'll be buffeted slightly by a little bit of chop in the water. Okay, just because of the size of the lakes, the bodies of water that you swim in, the wind is going to come along. There are going to be other swimmers, and there will be some slight movement as you're in the pool, much as you'd in the water, much as you'd expect in a pool. And just sit there and float for about 20-30 seconds. Until you get to a point where you know, okay, like this is my safe space, and I know that if I get into trouble when I'm out there, I can return to this place and I'm going to be safe. So once we got to the point where we understand that, you know what, there's actually only so much trouble that we can get into here, it's time to move out of your depth. Now, most sort of at least organised swimming locations, and I do recommend for your first open water swim, you absolutely go to an organised venue if at all possible. If that is impossible, if you live in a part of the world where there just isn't well managed and lifeguarded open water swimming facilities, make sure you have a friend or a family member there with you with some life-saving equipment who'll be able to actually do something useful to help you should you get into a little bit of trouble. But they will often have sort of marked out routes with buoys, and you need to start thinking of these buoys as being like a racing line around a racetrack. Okay, so if you are swimming between two buoys, or swimming between the lake entry and the first buoy, if you are on that most direct route, you are going to be most at chance of sort of bumping into people, holding people up. You know, this is the busy bit. So when we do this, when we are just sort of acclimatizing yourself to being in the open water, we want to make sure we're not doing it directly on our way to the first buoy. Okay, we maybe are just doing it to the side, to the left, to the right a little bit. And I want you to then take yourself just out of your depth, okay, so you can no longer touch the floor. Have a go at treading water there or floating on your back. And if you feel confident enough with this, it's time to get swimming. So what I recommend for your first open water swim is that most people are probably best off sticking to a little bit of heads up breaststroke. It's a really sort of simple stroke. You're just moving yourself through the water, getting confident with the idea of moving away from the shore. What I don't want you to do is put your face in the water. If you are a relatively new swimmer, you could well get your breathing wrong. You could well get a mouthful of lake water, which is never pleasant. And you then have a little bit of a panic. You turn around and realise that, oh, look, you're about 150 metres away from the shore. That's when people can get themselves into having a little bit of a panic attack. Okay, so swimming, a bit of breaststroke, just to get yourself used to being out in the open water, is a really good way to dip your toe into it. And so for that first lap over the shortest course that you can possibly do, I would like you to just swim heads up breaststroke. Now hopefully this won't be an awful experience. When you get round your first lap and you get back to shore and you think, wow, I did it. And you know what? Once I got going, that wasn't actually as scary as I thought it would be. That is the first major hurdle that you've cleared. Now, when you do your second loop, assuming that you want to do a second loop today, there is no shame in getting to this point and going, you know what, I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. I'm going to come back next week. I'm going to come back in a few days, whenever it is, whenever the lake's open next, and I'm going to have a crack again. There is no shame in that whatsoever. But I imagine a lot of people will go, you know what, this is going well. I'm going to keep going. Now, your second lap is where I want you to start including some front crawl or freestyle swimming. So that is facing the water, alternating arm action, what it is that you've most likely been training for in the pool. Now, you can absolutely get around a triathlon using breaststroke. It might be a little bit of a push at an Ironman, but there's absolutely no, you're going to meet the cutoffs of the vast majority of events with a breaststroke. And you know what? That's absolutely fine, but if we want to sort of really achieve our potential in triathlon, if we want to do well, if we want to finish faster, if we want to have more energy for the bike, freestyle swimming is the way that we want to go. I want you to start including this in little bursts during your second lap. So the chance of you being able to swim the entire first lap with your head in the water, motoring along, relatively slim. But I have worked with people before. I've given them all this talk. We got into the water and I said, okay, swim to the next buoy, please. And they just stick their head in the water and they go. And I remember there was somebody who just turned 18 that I was working with. Her mum bought me bought her a coach session with me. So I went down to this lake, did a session with her, gave her the talk. We went through all the health and safety. And said, okay, swim up to that buoy. And she must have gone out like face in the water, freestyle swimming, 135, 140 per 100. I was working hard keeping up with her. Some people take to it supernaturally. You may be one of these, in which case, great. You maybe don't need to take these baby steps. Equally, you could be somebody who is just that bit more nervous. I find that people who generally, are in their sort of mid-20s and above, where our brains are a little bit more sort of formed than that of a young adult, we have a bit of a different appreciation of risk and danger and a bit more of an aversion to these things. So don't worry too much if you're not taking to it super well. But the key to improving your confidence in the open water is simply time in the water. I had a real issue for the first sort of couple of years that I was racing. Well, 1.5 years that I was racing, where I freaked out in the open water. I was looking down and all I could see was this brown or green murk, and I didn't like that. Now, the way to get around this is just to swim more, and that's the mistake that I made, is that because I didn't like swimming in the open water, I only did it on race day. And when you're doing it on race day, surrounded by all these people around you, it's not a super pleasant experience. In fact, the third triathlon that I did, it was a lake that was really warm. It would be about 26, 27 degrees, and it was a 200 meter swim, I think. 300 meters, something similar. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to bother with the wetsuit. It was a boiling hot day. I didn't want to have to be faffing getting it off in transition. I actually, this was the Jensen Button Trust Triathlon. Some Formula One fellow Formula One nerds might appreciate the fact that I started this triathlon and I lined up next to Paul de Resta. I looked over to him and said, "Good luck, Paul." He said, "Thanks." And I don't think he ever scored a single point in Formula One again after that. So sorry, Paul. Anyway, back to the story. I did this 300-meter swim non-wetsuit, and that was definitely a knock to my confidence. Yes, it was probably faster not to have to worry about getting the wetsuit off in transition, but it was way too early in my triathlon career to be choosing not to wear a wetsuit. And on the subject, actually, that experience that I had, there was 2 races that we did in that day. The experience that I had didn't really fill me with confidence. I remember getting to about halfway through the course, slowing down, and just feeling like I was sinking in the water and going, oh my god, I'm in the middle of a lake. And having, definitely a bit of a panic. And it really took some time for me to get used to sort of the idea of skin swimming. Then a couple of years ago, I thought to myself, come on, Simon, you coach plenty of people who do lots of non-wetsuit swimming. You need to get better at it yourself. Chance of us ever having a wetsuit banned race in the UK is very low, but you know what? You've got to be prepared for all eventualities. So I went to the local lake and I went in just my tri-suit and I slowly built up the distances until I did sort of 800 meters non-wetsuit. And I thought, you know what? I feel good about this. I feel like a better swimmer for it. And then I went to a race, literally a couple of weeks later. We're in a bit of a heat wave. Somebody goes, wetsuits are banned. And at that point, I've been racing in triathlon for about 10 years. I had only just got round to really learning to swim without my wetsuit comfortably. No excuse for it. It's just, I'm a bit of a sinky person, about 55 kilos and more bone and muscle. I don't float in the water very well at all. But if I hadn't have actually taken the time to get used to that, I would have had a real freak out at that point in the race, learning that I'd have to learn to swim without a wetsuit for the first time on this 400-meter course. So it does pay to do a little bit, when the water gets warm enough, it does pay to do a little bit of training without your wetsuit. But that's an advanced technique. I'm just sort of sharing that with you now to give you a roadmap of how you can improve your open water swimming. So that realistically, if you then go out and you do your second lap with some with your face in the water for parts of it, you may actually feel, you know what, I'm going to do a third lap. I'm going to keep my face in the water the whole time. By this point, you're most likely, because most lakes have a minimum of a 400-meter loop, you're most likely to be 1,200 meters into a swim, which is a pretty decent amount. I wouldn't recommend you really push it out further than that. And then you can come back next week and you go, oh, you know what, maybe I'm going to do another sort of loop or two of the 400-meter course. Maybe have a go at the 750-meter course. There's often one on the third week that you go. Mix things up here. Set yourself little challenges, little targets to keep pushing the distance and keep improving week on week. Now, when you come out of the water, there is a good chance that you will start to feel a little bit unsteady, a little bit dizzy and uneasy. So the way that we get around this is by kicking our feet a little bit harder when we're just about to come out of the water, gets the blood flowing, gets the blood back to your brain, as opposed to just sort of being spread out quite evenly in your body, as it is when you're horizontal in water. Get the heart rate up again, so when you stand up, then it's less of a shock to the system. But yeah, when you get out, prepare for this, and if you need to, just sit yourself down. Now, this is something that I often get the first swim that I do every year, which will probably be in the next week or two. I get myself down to the lake. I do feel a little bit uneasy, a little bit dizzy, but I just walk slowly and it passes relatively quickly. But when you're just starting out, it can be a real sort of shock to the system, this dizziness that comes. So just prepare yourself for it. Make sure that you don't overextend yourself and sort of get caught out. And don't find yourself having a little bit of a panic. If you do find yourself a bit dizzy, just sit down, lie down if you need to. Close your eyes until it passes. It won't take that long. I'd also recommend, if it was an especially cold swim, against removing your swim cap immediately. Now, this is a mistake that I made at Swim Serpentine. about 5-6 years ago. Came out of the water and took my hat straight off, thinking I'm in triathlon. Although, honestly, I think the water was only about like 14 and a half, 15 degrees. It was quite chilly that year. I remember when I competed in my first lap, I thought, I'm getting cold here, but I wanted my London Classics medal. I kept going. I would have done it anyway. Came out and took my hat off, jumped in the jacuzzi, and without my wetsuit, obviously, and I kept shivering in the jacuzzi. I kept saying I was fine. Eventually, the person in the jacuzzi next to me went to go and get the medical team, who went and pulled me out the hot tub, and I was shaking with hypothermia, even though I was in the hot tub. Pulled me out, stuck me in a wheelchair, wheeled me over. This is again going back to me being about 55 kilos. Wheeled me into the tent, stuck me on a bed, covered me in a load of blankets. And I remember just literally feeling the life coming back into me after about 5 minutes sat there. So if you do take your hat off immediately, that can allow a lot of the heat to escape. So keep your hat on if you're coming out and it's really quite a cold day, and resist the urge. If there are any facilities such as a sauna or hot showers, resist the urge to jump straight in. Okay, you might want to get your wetsuit off. Now, as you take your wetsuit off, you'll get a nice sort of rush of warm water escaping your wetsuit. This is the water that had warmed up to your body temperature, which I referred to earlier. It's warm water falling on your feet, and then take your wetsuit off, and then you can start toweling yourself off, getting yourself dry. If possible, do this indoors, so you don't have sort of the wind chill on you. But don't jump straight into that hot shower. There is a phenomenon known as the after drop, which is that your body temperature will, when you get in the water, you'll start to get chilly, but then your body temperature will stabilize. Then when you get out of the water, you then start to get colder again. So be aware of this. If you do jump in straight into a hot shower, that can be too much of a shock to the system, and that is the kind of thing that could set off any heart conditions that you may not know that you have. It's not generally a safe, recognised way to do it. It's much better to warm yourself up slowly and gently. Don't jump straight into a sauna. And just be sensible about it. I know it's going to be very tempting to do this. Maybe have yourself start sipping on a warm drink. Don't down a hot drink to get yourself as warm as possible. Maybe start sipping and slowly bringing your body temperature up like that. If it is especially cold as well, you may want to think about bringing a woolly hat that you can put on after the swim to help trap the heat, and a big coat. It's one of the reasons that people wear dry robes. Something really big and fluffy to help warm yourself back up. Just like that, you've completed your first open water swim. Look at you go. So again, it's quite intimidating. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So I cannot blame somebody for being very intimidated. I was very intimidated myself. If you're really nervous about this and you are bricking yourself and you actually feel more nervous after listening to this podcast, do find a local coach who'll be able to take you into the lake. I'm based in the Cotswolds, if anybody's in the area. If you do need somebody who can then take you into the water, can be there, can help talk you through it, and that you've got somebody next to you in the water, that's ideal. Equally, there are a number of lakes will do sort of introduction to open water sessions, so they'll do sessions where they will help you prepare for the open water, take you through the equipment. They'll go through things like sighting, race starts, drafting, all of these technical bits that I can't really explain very well on an audio podcast, and I'm trying to keep it relatively simple here. But it is really worth making sure that you go into this relatively comfortably. If I had the money at the time, it would have been a great idea for me to get either join a coach session or get in the water with someone. It would have really helped accelerate my development as an athlete. Actually, I'm going to touch on sighting. I've had a change of heart. So when you are swimming in the open water, you're going to have to think about the direction in which you're swimming. You don't have a nice black line to follow like you do in the pool. So when you are in the open water, you will want to do what we call sort of a sighting maneuver once every now and then when you're swimming. How often you have to do it depends on a number of things, including how balanced your stroke is. But I would recommend that especially a new open water swimmer does this relatively regularly. And instead of trying to do some fancy sighting maneuver, it's probably best if you just do one stroke of breaststroke, assuming there aren't other swimmers in close proximity to you. I don't want somebody kicking me hard just because they want to see where they're going, but when you're starting out, if you're in a non-race situation, this is absolutely fine. Just sort of stick your head out the water, do a stroke or two of breaststroke, see where the buoy is, check that you're still swimming in the right direction. And there we have it. So I hope that you feel better informed, even if a bit more intimidated right now. I hope that you have a great start to your career in triathlon and open water swimming. And just before we go, a quick reminder that by the end of the week, I will have ended the 50% off offer on my Introduction to Strength and Conditioning for Triathlon course. So hop down to the show notes and grab your copy while you can. All the best for the rest of the week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.